Welcome to the Town of Avon Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. If you are interested in having a copy of the agenda or the staff reports, they're available on the tables to the right of the audience. This meeting is being recorded for the public record. Because of this, we request that personal conversations are kept to a minimum and all cell phones are set to vibrate with any phone calls taken outside of the chambers. If you are interested in commenting during any public hearing, please sign up on the sheets located on the tables to the right of the audience. When your name is called, please step forward to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Please address your comments to the board and not to staff or the appellant. Your comments should relate directly to the case at hand. We do understand there may be several persons who wish to speak. The chair may therefore impose a time limit on each person. Federal law requires that the town make available to all attendees a Title VI public involvement survey. These surveys are on the table to the right of the audience. Members of the public who wish to complete this survey may do so and place them in the designated area. If because of a disability, any person in attendance needs assistance or accommodation to fully participate in this meeting, please notify staff. Your assistance in facilitating a respectful, fair, and timely. Thank you for your assistance in facilitating a respectful, fair, and timely meeting. Again, welcome to our meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Paul Guckenberger.
Here.
Ann Inman.
Here.
Catherine Ransberg.
Here.
Marcy Tashler. Marcus Turner.
Here.
5 present. We have a quorum.
Okay. First on the agenda is the approval of minutes, and I believe there are these updated minutes? Do I have I have the minutes to sign. I'm sorry. The ones that say draft are the same thing.
Yep, that's it.
Okay. You have your minutes in front of you. Did anyone have any questions, concerns, changes?
Were we, or am I thinking of the other meeting, were we 2 months behind in meeting minutes? Or was that the other meeting?
I still have not done the ones I said I was going to do, so this is from the previous meeting. But I haven't done February, so February still
Okay,
needs to be done.
just making sure I'm not misremembering.
In his defense, the reason he's behind is because the one that was taking notes before just didn't do the minutes.
Throwing yourself under the bus.
I am.
It's an admirable quality. So,
If there are no questions or comments, we'll entertain a motion.
I move we accept the meeting minutes for March 21st, 2023 with no changes or edits.
We have a motion by Mrs. Ransberg. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Inman. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Minutes are approved. Next item is a request for continuances or agenda modifications. Ian?
We have none.
Okay. And we will go on to, wow, missing something here. We'll go on to public comment. Is there anyone that wishes to address the board right now? And with no one coming forward, we will close public comment. Old business. First item is VAR 2303 Lamar Billboard Illumination. Ian?
Yep, we're going to do both of the Lamar Digital Billboard petitions together here since they're regarding the same property and they are essentially mutually dependent on each other. So just bear with me here. The first one is VAR 2303. That's Lamar Billboard Illumination. That's a request for approval of a variance of development standards to allow for an illuminated signage, a billboard, within 600 feet of a residential district. In conjunction with that, we will be going over VARU 2304. That's the Lamar Digital Billboard conversion. And that's a request for approval of a use variance to allow for the conversion of a legally established non-conforming billboard sign into a digital billboard sign. It's located at 7341 East US Highway 36. That's Lot 2 of Avon Business Center, Section 1. You may be more familiar with it as Remax Centerstone. There's a parcel ID on the screen. The Remax property is 0.7 acres, and it's Zone C2 and is located within Tier 1 of the US Highway 36 Overlay Zoning District. This is the sign in question. A little hard to see on the projector here, but it should also be included in your staff report there. The sign is indicated in red here. Of course, most of the surrounding area is Zone C2, General Commercial. But you will see here in the top left corner, there is a little yellow. That yellow is R2 zoning district. And that's what brings us to the first variance request. That sign is located approximately 525 feet from the edge of that zoning district here. Whereas stated before, the ordinance requires it be 600 feet away if it is illuminated. This may give you a better idea of the sign that we're talking about here. This is looking eastward, and here it is looking westward. Staff doesn't actually know the date that the billboard was erected because it existed prior to the town's incorporation in 1995. So we don't really have any documents regarding the sign's original construction. Other history, more recent history, is that the appellants were granted one continuance on February 21st, if you remember, and that was in order to revise their proposal. They wanted to address concerns that they had read in the staff report published by us. And then at the past meeting, you granted them another continuance to allow their legal counsel to attend. So we're going to jump back to VAR 2303. It's a request for approval of variance of development standards for an internally illuminated billboard within 600 feet of a residential district. The standard in question is section 6.16C3 of the Unified Development Ordinance, and it states that a sign within 600 feet of a residential district cannot be illuminated unless it is visibly obstructed from view from the residential district. It's, as I said, approximately 525 feet from that closest edge. I don't have access to that person's backyard, but I did drive in the street in front of it, and I believe that it would be visible from their backyard. VARU, as 2304, as stated before, is a use variance to allow for the conversion of the non-conforming, legally established non-conforming sign into a digital billboard. Chapter 2.10 and 4 of the UDO, which is the chapter 2.10 is the US 36 overlay section. It says that off-premise advertising or billboard signs are prohibited within the US Highway 36 overlay. As I said, they're mutually dependent on each other. In order for them to illuminate the sign, they would be increasing the intensity of use and would therefore need a use variance because it is prohibited in the overlay district. Legally established nonconforming uses cannot expand their intensity without losing their legally established nonconforming status. At the time that the billboard was erected, it was legal, but the ordinance has since changed to prohibit that. The digital billboard will remain the same size and height as the existing billboard. It'll just be illuminated. Staff has several reservations regarding the proposed conversion of the billboard into an illuminated billboard. We're going to go through these each. Driver and pedestrian safety, we think that the illumination and the changing of those messages could cause a distraction to drivers and pedestrians, especially in an area, if you recall, is near a fire department and near a school where increased attentiveness is imperative. General light nuisance and US 36 highway aesthetics. We believe that the intent of the overlay district is to maintain an aesthetic, a pleasing aesthetic for that corridor, since that is the corridor through our town. property values may have the potential to affect property values of those homes within that 600-foot radius that may be able to see the sign from their backyard. And we don't find that there is a clear and convincing practical difficulty associated with this request. We believe that that existing billboard is able to accomplish its goal of advertising in a sufficient manner. And we'll tie it back to, again, to the intent of the ordinance and the prohibition of that. The prohibition of it is to eventually, over time, eradicate those signs from the 36 corridor, and to allow them to increase the intensity of use is contradictory to that intent. So after we published our February staff report, the appellant met with us to discuss our concerns and in order to mitigate those concerns. And they proposed an alternative billboard sign which utilized louvers around the cells of the light cells on the billboard, which would reduce the viewing and light emission angle. And while this does serve to mitigate the negative effects specifically to those neighboring residential areas, we still maintain many of those concerns that I went over before. So in this photo, you will see the original light emission angle, I suppose, what you would call it. As you can see, it's almost 180 degrees. And the louvers would cut it down to approximately 60 degrees here. So they would not be able to view it from here. Ultimately, staff does recommend denial of variance 2303, Lamar billboard illumination, and we recommend denial of VAR U 2304, Lamar digital billboard conversion. And with that, I am available for questions.
Questions for staff?
Yes, I do have a couple of questions. So I'm assuming that the billboard was originally erected pursuant to county approval.
Yes,
And so there's no records from the county.
none that I was able to acquire.
Okay. And then, so this billboard is not currently illuminated, right?
Correct.
Okay, so what they're asking for is not only that it be allowed to have illumination, but that it also be transferred, be converted to a digital billboard.
I believe it is uplit at the current moment.
Oh, it's uplit,
Yes.
okay.
But they're,
Okay, okay.
But they
Just
would be
want to make
changing
sure
it
I
to a
understand,
picture.
I understood what that
Yep.
was. Okay.
So Ian, I think we had discussed this at one point as something on another case, but I understand that this was built before the town was incorporated. But I also understand the town has an ordinance where you need a variance to have two primary purposes on a property. Obviously, they wouldn't have had to come in to get this since they came in before the town. But I guess the question that results from that is, what is the primary use of this property? Is there a primary use? Is there a secondary use? Is it a primary use and the billboard would be an accessory use? How do you classify that?
So it's considered two primary uses. The first primary use is, I believe an office building. Is that right?
The Centerstone Remax.
Yeah. And then the second primary use is the off-premise advertising sign. So we would consider it two primary uses on one lot. It's not uncommon for that, you to have that on a commercial lot. Residential lots, not so much.
Okay.
What'd you say the second primary use was?
The billboard.
Oh, the bill, okay.
Yeah,
That's why I
the
thought.
billboard, and there's an office use and a billboard. So the off-premise advertising sign is not operated as an accessory use to the office building. It's just second freestanding. It's a second
And is that
sign.
true with all, so even, what do they call them? The pillar billboards outside shopping centers?
If you have a freestanding on-premise freestanding identification sign, that is accessory to the use of like a shopping.
Because it's
center
related
sign.
specifically
Right,
to.
because it's accessory to that use. It's bound to the primary use of the structure. But the billboard and another use on the same lot are considered two primary uses.
And so having the two primary uses on the same property would be considered illegal, non-conforming.
It would be. I think that's right. I think our ordinance does limit even commercial lots to one primary use per lot, but it's possible. I don't know. I'd have to take a look at the ordinance.
So if that's the case, then there's still a need for addressing that, because if this would be approved to make it a legal, if they get the variance to come into conformance with the variance, there'd still be it wouldn't be consistent with the ordinances on two uses of the property, because now that introduces two primary uses on a single lot.
I guess I can grab the ordinance and take them back.
And here, let me see if I can rephrase that and get this right. So the need for this ordinance would trigger the need to come in conformance with the other variances. Is that what you're suggesting? Okay.
The loss of the grandfathered status then triggers having to meet other ordinances, which having two primary uses on that one spot would also be in conflict. So the only way that the billboard can keep its grandfathered status or be legally conforming is to not change at all.
Take a look at how, when it gets back to see how the UDO addresses that. My initial reaction is that the use of it as an off-premise advertising sign isn't going to change, whether it's illuminated or digital. So in that sense, the use would still be a legal non-conforming use, regardless of if we change the intensity of the use and allow it to be internally illuminated.
So it would maintain the grandfathered status?
It would still be a legal non-conforming use in the sense that it's an off-premise advertising sign being used for that purpose. Would be my initial reaction, but let's look at, see how the UDO addresses that.
Which one are we talking about now? We're talking about two primary uses on one lot?
Commercial lot.
So where would that be? We could probably go forward and put stuff from bottom looking for.
Okay.
I'm familiar with that area. It's not too far from where I live. And I agree with staff's concerns about, particularly with regards to making it a digital billboard. I am concerned about the distraction caused by it being very near the middle school as well as the fire station. I know the first time I saw a digital billboard, I found myself going, what is that?
Let's
not a-
let's save our commentary until after the public hearing.
Okay.
Were you asking him a question? I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
If you were asking,
No, I'm just saying.
I thought we were
that
getting into discussion here.
Well, no, I was just saying I agree with staff's conclusion there.
Just don't know where that is in the ordinance. That's the problem. I know I've read it. I can't remember where.
I'm looking for it. If you guys want to go forward.
That's fine. Rich, are you okay with this going forward? Okay. Any other questions for staff? We are ready to hear from petitioner.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I've got some goodies I'm going to pass out. Well, good evening. I vote we put a bigger podium in the budget for next session. My name's Alan Townsend. I work at 111 Monument Circle, Suite 2700, Indianapolis, Indiana 46204. I represent Lamar Advertising. Lamar is one of the largest and most respected outdoor advertising companies in the country. And I've given you this handout because I think it'll be helpful if I can show you some things as we kind of walk through our presentation. It's always easier for me to see things to try and get a feel for this. We are combining kind of two petitions into one in our presentation too. So Jason and I may need a little latitude on time if you can be so forgiving. In tab 1, I've given you a little bit of background information about Lamar, the different services they provide and advertising mediums they offer, one of which is this digital component that we're here to talk to you about with you tonight. So this application, as you've heard from staff, seeks conversion of an already existing off-premises outdoor advertising sign to a digital outdoor advertising sign. And I'm glad we cleared up. The sign is illuminated at night already. Lights are off during the day, but they're on at night. The existing sign's approximately 40 feet in height. It's 14 by 48 in size, and it has what we call back-to-back faces. It's located at 7341 East US Highway 36, and it's oriented to US Highway 36. If you look at tab 2, you'll get a really nice aerial visual of the outdoor advertising sign. It sits on the south side of the road. If you're familiar with that area, and it sounds like you are, it's really just across the road from this large auto repair yard. It's kind of fenced in, so you can't always tell what's back there, but now you can see from this photo. And it's on the Remax property. Under tab 3, you can see the actual parcel where the sign is located. Under tab 4, you get both the east and the west street view. The area is zone C2. It's surrounded by all kinds of other commercial and retail uses. So the existing sign would remain exactly where it is in its current location, but what would be changed is that we'd be updating the faces to replace them with digital faces. There's also a description of this in your booklet under tab 5, so you can see exactly what's being proposed. So the orientation of the faces would not change. They'd continue to be oriented to Highway 36. The digital faces would hold a message in position for 8 seconds before it promptly transitioned to the next message. This technology is really quite remarkable. So the digital faces will have light sensing technology, which will dim the faces in relation to the surrounding ambient light. They'll be equipped with cybersecurity protocols to prevent unauthorized messages. And it'll also have a go black feature in case of some sort of catastrophic failure. Both sides of the sign would go completely black. There's a Lamar-related entity called TLC Properties that has a permanent easement across this parcel. I've given you a copy of that permanent easement under tab 6. That's important because there would be no risk of a lease expiring where the landlord might refuse to renew the lease. So we're going to make the investment in this digital sign. We know we won't have difficulty with the property owner. These digital faces can be utilized for all kinds of community service messages upon a separate agreement, maybe with the town, with the school, or other community organizations. The digital faces, it's Lamar's standard operating procedure that they'll be part of the Amber Alert program. It's a network utilized for messages regarding missing children to get messages out to the public. One of the real assets of these digital signs is what you'll see under tab 7 or 8 and 9. If you look at tab 7, you get a sense for the kind of short-term community messages that can be offered with digital signs that really just aren't available through what we call the old-fashioned technology. So you can publicize local events, fundraisers, the high school teams, the Avon Band. What you can do under tab 8 is have short-term digital tributes to members of the community, service organizations, things of that nature. The other really unique component of digital is under tab 9, it's the law enforcement component. Lamar also works with the FBI to get out most wanted messages, information about cash rewards for people who are being under warrant for arrest and sought after. And these are all things that for them really to be effective, the law enforcement component, they need to go up quickly. And with the old-fashioned technology, a message like that really can't get up quickly because it has to be printed on a piece of vinyl, shipped here, and somebody actually has to go out and put it up. So we think these are great community assets that we'd like to utilize on this structure. So let's talk about these standards because we're happy to talk about them. We think the evidence we're sharing with you tonight will satisfy them. One is that the grant will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. So we've got an existing outdoor advertising sign. We want to update it with digital faces. I was able to find out through Lamar's help how long it's been up. If you go back to tab 10, you can find the original improvement location permit granted by Hendricks County in July of 1987. So it's been out there for 36 years, lighted at night without causing any injury to the public health, safety, morals, or welfare of the community. So the only real difference for us coming before you tonight is the manner in which the message will be displayed. So right now we have external illumination. We have lights that shine up on the board at night. The digital faces are all internally illuminated. So you know, the Indiana Department of Transportation specifically allows digital outdoor advertising signs at this location. Under tab 11, I've given you the original permit from NDOT that allowed this sign to be located where it is. If you're confused by the dates, that would make sense. NDOT didn't even start regulating outdoor advertising signs until the early 1990s. So you'll have a sign that went up in 87 that's not getting permitted to the 90s. If you're curious about that, that's why. Under tab 12, Lamar has already received its permit from NDOT to convert this to digital. It's allowable as a matter of right. NDOT has granted the permit. We understand we need permission from you also, but this is something that NDOT allows. Under tab 13, there's even a set of NDOT regulations concerning digital outdoor advertising signs. I've given you an excerpt that I put together to show you what they are. The legislature gave NDOT the authority to regulate digital structures. It has done so, and I've just included some of the language that NDOT requires us to follow, and we do follow, gladly so. There was a mention by the staff about driver distraction. I do want to talk about that. The Out-of-Home Advertising Association of America, the OAAA, has noted that the Federal Highway Administration conducted a comprehensive study regarding driver distraction and digital outdoor advertising signs. Under tab 14, I've given you kind of a summary of the OAAA's view of the Federal Highway Administration study. If you're like me, I'm a little leery of a trade association study. So what I did was I went and tracked down the Federal Highway Administration study itself. You'll find excerpts to it under tab 15. It was about 80 pages long, so I've pared it down for you. I wanted to find the relevant language where it talked about the summary, its conclusions. I found it on page 55, and that's where it said, after doing its study, it found no causal connection between digital signs and driver's distraction. So that's not a Lamar study or a trade association study. That's actually the Federal Highway Administration. So we think that's important to that first component. Staff also expressed some concern about digital signs, and in particular, the effect of illumination on public safety and nearby residences. So what I've given you under tab 16 is this chart that Ian was showing earlier. It's really important because it displays how the technology for these digital signs can address these concerns effectively. So these digital faces, if this variance is granted, will come equipped with louvers that limit the direction of the light emitting from the faces. That's again under tab 16. And I'm going to ask Jason, because he's in the industry, to step up here for just a couple minutes and explain to you how that works. Jason?
Hello, good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you. My name is Jason Graham of Lamar Advertising, 5711 West Minnesota Street, Indianapolis, 46241. The page that you have in front of you is the light study that we did when we realized that there were some concerns about where exactly you're going to be able to see this billboard. We changed the face. This is a newer technology among digital billboards. There's actually not one in Indianapolis yet. This will be the first. And you see that it reduces the cone of visibility. But more importantly, what I want you guys to take a look at, if you were to take and look at the 0 degree line, that's the most intense direct line that you can get for light on this billboard. At 200 feet, you'll see it says 0.22. That's important. It's 0.22 foot candles. At the 400 foot, it's 0.06. And at 600 feet, it's 0.02. And I want to give you a relevance to what that means in a foot candle, because it's very important. The paper that you're looking at right now, the light in this room, in order for you to read this paper that you have in front of you, it's about 30 foot candles to give you something to correlate that with. In a surgery room where they operate, you're looking at about 70 foot candles. So by the time we get to 600 feet or to the backyards, to the firehouse, we're at 0.02. I did meet with the fire chief. We spoke about the building. There are no sleeping quarters on that side. There are no windows. We even talked about the light that's over the door to see in the parking lot. That will create more light than our billboard will in the parking lot of the fire department. I spoke with Chief Brock. He did not have any issues with that. I also know that we had some, if you turn to the next page, you'll see that there's a letter from Kevin Carr. We did work with the school district. We know that that was a concern. We want you to know that we've taken all these things very seriously. We've gone over that light study with the school district as well, and they did not find any issues with that, with our light bearing on the school. So we do have, and I think more importantly, one of the last things I want to leave you with is the photocell that Alan mentioned. That controls the intensity of our board automatically regarding the daylight around it. So if it turns cloudy, that board's going to adjust itself and bring the intensity down. At night, just so you guys can kind of understand how it works, that board will reduce itself to 10% capacity. One of the things that's not regulated with photocells is when you see electronic messaging boards like in front of stores, they have no photocell. So those run at full intensity at all times. And that's a big difference between us. And I think that's important to take note of. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. I knew he'd do a better job explaining that than I could. So you know, and to give you some perspective, there are probably more than 10,000 digital outdoor advertising signs in the U.S. In Marion County alone, there are at least 5 back-to-backs, 2 on I-70, 2 along Fall Creek right outside the Indiana State Fairgrounds if you're ever there. There's one in Castleton. So when this sign is upgraded, it'll conform to all federal, NDOT, and industry standards with regard to construction and safety. The second prong I wanted to talk about, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. So again, we have a sign that's been up for 36 years. It's illuminated at night. We're hoping to replace those faces with digital faces. And we've gathered no evidence that it's affected a neighborhood in a substantially adverse manner. In fact, as long as this sign has been out there, I mean, you can take notice of how the area has grown up around a sign that's already illuminated at night. So what I'd ask you to keep an open mind about and consider is what we're really doing here is an advancement in technology, because that's what this is. So rather than yesterday's technology, which I'll tell you requires ordering a big sheet of vinyl that's had an advertisement printed on it, it's shipped here and someone has to climb up and put it on. This technology is safer. No worker will ever have to climb this structure to change an ad because the changing of the ads is done from a control room. The digital faces will provide affordable advertising opportunities to your local community. Jason, as he mentioned, he's already, and his team have already talked to the Avon School Corporation. They've provided a letter of support under tab 17. They've also consulted with a local realtor, Brad Tonias at Tucker, to offer an opinion about the impact of the two digital faces at this location on residential property values. And he believes, based on his professional experience, that there would be no negative impact on residential property values. He's given you a letter under tab 18. And one thing I wanted to make clear that I don't think is clear so far, when you measure this sign, Ian had a chart up to show how close it was to a residential neighborhood across the street and back behind a row of commercial. If you measured it to the edge of the residential boundary, yes, it's 500 and some feet. If you actually measured the sign to the residential structure, it's more than 600 feet. Let's talk about the last three prongs and I will wind this up. Strict application of the terms of the ordinance constitute a practical difficulty or arises from some condition peculiar to the property. So Avon's ordinance does not allow digital at this site without a variance. That is a peculiarity. So think about it. All the businesses around this advertising sign have been permitted to adapt to new technology. Can Lamar? I'd submit to you that Lamar should be able to do so also, because it's counterintuitive to tell a business that you can't use the latest technology when it's neither illegal nor immoral. I think sometimes people in your position are concerned that if we approve one of these, what's next? Well, Lamar believes that all of these, if anybody else would come before you, digital signs should be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. It's the right way to do it. This is a heavy commercial retail area. This is where a sign that's digital fits. This would not be an outlier if you would approve it. The last thing I've given you in my booklet are all the other municipalities where Lamar maintains digital inventory, some in and around Indianapolis. Jason and I just worked together late last year to get a digital approved in the town of Lawrence in Marion County. Is the variance required the minimum necessary, or will the ordinance constitute an unnecessary hardship as applied? In many ways, I'd say this factor is similar to the last. So the question is it unfair to prohibit Lamar from upgrading its outdoor advertising sign with the latest and best technology, especially when it can be done safely? The answer is yes, that would be unfair. So even though this technology in the grand scheme of things is relatively new, it's tested, it works. The sign with digital faces could actually be a community asset to the town of Avon. Let me talk about the last prong. The need for the variance was not caused by the owner, previous or present, and the variance is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Well, it's clearly consistent with the comprehensive plan because it's been on the site for 36 years. And there's nothing Lamar did to create this situation. If the technology had been available to build a sign like this in 1987 or soon thereafter, I can assure you it would already be in place. But the laws on this corridor have changed, and they've changed in a way that prohibits the use of legitimate technological advances. Lamar simply wants to use that technology here. It's tested, it's available, it's effective, and we would appreciate your support. If you have any questions, I know we threw a lot at you there in a short amount of time with the technology and the history, please let me know or Jason know, and we'll do the best we can to answer.
Thank you. Before we do questions, we're going to open up the public hearing. And
So, yeah, we did find it. It's section 5.2 of the ordinance, 5.2 of the ordinance. And it allows in a lot in a non-residential district may have more than one principal use devoted to non-residential uses. So on a commercial or industrial or institutional lot, you can have multiple primary uses. It is prohibited for single-family uses. A lot used for single-family residential purposes must have only one principal use devoted to the residential use. So, yeah, and this is, for instance, telecommunications facilities are typically co-located on with another use. Sewer lift stations are usually considered a primary use, and so are off-premise advertising signs.
thank
So
you.
it's permitted. It's permitted by right.
Thank you for that clarification. At this time, we're going to open the public hearing. And to be clear, this is the public hearing for VAR 23-03 and VARU 23-04, both for, well, the first for Lamar billboard illumination, the second for Lamar digital billboard conversion. Is anyone signed up to speak?
Jason Graham? I would say you guys, and Alan Townsend. That's you guys. Okay, just the petitioners signed up for it.
Would anyone else like to speak on either of these cases? And with no one coming forward, we will close the public hearing. It's open for questions and discussion.
So I do have a question for the petitioner. Would you mind coming to the podium, please? So does Lamar own any of the other billboards in Avon?
Along 36, we do not have any of the other billboards.
Do you have any other billboards in the town of Avon?
In the town, I don't think anything falls within the boundaries, no.
Okay,
So this is the only one.
okay. Thank you.
I have some questions here. So I was going through the study, and I'm not sure, maybe both of you can, or Mr. Townsend, you can address it. I was looking at the Federal Highway Administration study that you presented here. And the study does not say that there's no correlation between accidents and CEVMS. It says this study was conducted to investigate the effect of CEVMS on driver visual behavior in a roadway driving environment, which basically is we're looking at where drivers' eyes go. It doesn't say anything about the correlation between that behavior and accidents. I didn't see anything in here. I was reading, trying to skim through it. So it bothers me a little bit that you said, well, they show that there's no correlation, because that's not what this says at all. It just simply says, well, in fact, it shows that the two cities that they looked at had there was different behaviors in the different cities. And then I also, when you are concerned about the location to the school and the fire station, doesn't have to do with sleeping quarters in the fire station. It has to do with the behavior of drivers on that section of 36. And in fact, in this, in your study on page 54, it says, the slower speed on arterials and sign placement may present drivers with more opportunities to gaze at the signs. This is a school zone, which means it would be a slower speed. So I guess I would like you to address the fact that this study does not say there's no correlation. It doesn't speak to accidents at all. It just simply talks about eye movement. There's a difference in the results of the two towns. And honestly, to me, it was a study looking for an outcome that didn't really reach one. It just kind of, I was looking for, there was an examination of looking at auto traffic records, pedestrian accident records, and comparing it to, did those go up when a CEVMS was installed? I saw nothing about that. So if you'd like to address
Sure.
those concerns.
I will grant you, it's hard to digest a study of this nature in light of its length. And, but that's one of the reasons I wanted to track it down myself instead of relying on what the OAAA said. So I went to page, when I was going through it, because I read all of it, I thought the most informative information was on page 55 of the study. So I'm under tab 15.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't give you the entirety of the study because
Sure.
it was so long, but I went to the summary. And that's where it talks about a summary of the data that was in this study and the majority of the visual attention to areas of the roadway that were relevant to the task at hand. And if you go to the last sentence of that paragraph, when billboards were present, the drivers in this study sometimes looked at them, which of course we expect, but not such that overall attention to the forward roadway decreased.
Which still doesn't create a connection, which still doesn't address the issue of whether or not there was an increase in pedestrian or vehicle accidents when there was an increase or an introduction of these signs. And that's that, when you said you had this study, that I went, okay, here we go. Here's some empirical data we can look at that can give us some information. And I'm not seeing that here. I'm just seeing, and they talked about how they used eye trackers, and then some of them, they had actual researchers in the car with them, but that could also create its own problem. It's kind of like, I can't remember what they call it now in sociology, but the act of observing actually changes the behavior of the observed. I didn't see anything here talking about traffic patterns and incidences of accidents. So to me,
Yeah, please go ahead.
I need more information.
I mean, and that's something we could certainly provide. The intentions, there's several studies out there. We feel this one's the most impactful, but they all relate to the same thing, is really the only thing that they can put their finger on is that people are not looking away from driving to a period of time that they feel would cause a problem. To find out whether or not an accident was caused from a billboard, the only thing that I can give you is probably anecdotal. I've been we've had the digital billboards for my entire career, which is 22 years, for 15 years. Lamar operates over 4,000 across the country, and not once have we ever been accused of causing an accident with a digital billboard.
I don't think anybody's saying that an accident, I think we're not getting to the point. The point is, has anybody ever done a study that looked at a municipality's incident of accidents in a place where there was a CEVMS or a digital billboard, and looked and compared it to the accident rate, either pedestrian or vehicle, before it was in place and after it's in place? Do you have anything like that that shows that there's no difference?
We've spoke with IMPD in the city of Indianapolis, and the accident rates, the digital billboards were already in place, and they go up every year as traffic and drivers go up. There was no significant, we can provide you that. We have a letter of support from the IMPD as well, because they took a look at that. We didn't bring it here. It's Avon. That's something, if that's, we could submit, if that's going to make a difference, we'd be happy to get that for you. But they didn't feel that there was any impact in Indianapolis, which now has several digital billboards on Interstate 70 with accidents before or after.
Do you have any data from any place that, I mean, a highway is different from city driving. A highway is generally not located next to a school. I mean, you're not going to have traffic directly in front of a school on I-70. I mean, if a person gets in an accident on I-70 because they were distracted by a billboard changing or whatever, and even if there's a school right next to the highway, the accident isn't going to impact that school. Do you have any data showing that in a municipality?
The difference between a local surface street, I don't believe there's any studies that would show, only that the driver attention is not distracted long enough to be a concern. And that's what we test, is are we taking our eyes off the road long enough to not be looking forward in not paying attention to the road.
Well, the zone study says the slower speed on arterials and sign placement may present drivers with more opportunities to gaze at the signs. And so that actually, I mean, there's no conclusions here that make me say, yes, there's absolutely no difference in potential accidents when there's a digital sign versus when there's not. I don't see any evidence supporting your position. I don't see any evidence negating it. But to say that this supports your position, that these are just as safe, I disagree with that.
Okay.
So as a follow-up, when you pass these out, I guess I'd ask staff, have you had a chance to review this prior to this meeting?
I have not. I talked with them regarding studies. I looked at studies that they had mentioned, but this entire packet, no, I have not.
Yeah, we met with the petitioner.
Have you,
For,
so then did you have an opportunity to review the 80-page or however many page study, since we only got an excerpt of the study?
I have not.
Okay.
To piggyback on some of Mrs. Ransberg's comments, tab 19, you provide us with a list of municipalities where Lamar operates and maintains digital outboard advertising signs. Of those communities listed, how many of those are not on an interstate? Have signs that are not on an interstate, sorry.
Valparaiso, South Bend, Fort Wayne, Muncie, Lafayette, Anderson, Terre Haute, Evansville. All of those have surface street billboards on them.
And within how many, within Hendricks County, how many electronic billboards do you have in place?
This would be the first one.
And why is this the first one?
This is the first time that we've gone in front and had the resources to be able to come in and do it.
Do you know if any of the other municipalities in Hendricks County, if their ordinance prohibits digital billboards?
That would be, we haven't actually tried in any,
Okay.
I mean, you know, obviously it's a big investment on our part and we look to do it where, you know, we're going to be able to see a return. So we look for locations that are going to be, you know, we're going to be able to do that. We don't want to just put a digital billboard anywhere.
Fair enough.
Just the follow-up with, on practical difficulty, because this is the one criterion that always tends to be one we look at. And I'm trying to understand, I guess the argument that you present and what we read here would basically say our ordinance is the practical difficulty, not the property.
I would also argue that the property, because we have an easement here, it's not a leased location, so I own this property. I can't move it. I can't put this billboard somewhere else when the lease expires. So the property itself.
It's true, because our ordinance wouldn't allow it to be placed anywhere else because the overlay district doesn't allow billboards at this time. So it's allowed because it's grandfathered in. But as we've done and looked at with other properties, once they do any sort of construction that triggers the ability or the need to conform the ordinance, then we look to conform the ordinance, which would then say that this billboard shouldn't be in that location. And that's where I don't see the practical, I'm having a hard time and agreeing with how you define practical difficulty.
A couple things on that, and that's a good question, because I think anytime you have a variance request where the practical difficulty component comes into play, it's a real head scratcher sometimes. And it's hard to look for, it's hard to see, but I do think those are the two primary practical difficulties. So there was a sign that was built in 1987, and in this instance, it happens to be a sign instead of a building or some kind of other structure. But because of the way your ordinance, your council has adopted ordinances over the course of time, Lamar and really nobody else can update their improvement for current technology. Now, That's a practical difficulty because it's really difficult to sit here and think of any other business on that corridor where legislatively somebody has said to them, there may be much better, much more useful, much more efficient technology, but I'm sorry, you can't use it. And Jason's point about the easement, he's not the title holder of this property, but they have a permanent easement on this parcel, so you can't easily go negotiate a lease with somebody else. They're here. The easement lasts as long as the property is there. So when you combine those two, I know it's unique, I know it's unusual, but it certainly seems like a practical difficulty that the only way to overcome it and fully utilize your easement and the property is through a variance. And I would like to comment a little bit more on the safety issue. Everything that happens on state and federally funded highways, the policy is dictated from our federal government. That's where the Highway Beautification Act came from. That's why when you saw the state of Indiana start permitting these signs in 1993, that's where the hammer came down on the state because our federal highway department said, either you start regulating these signs, counting them, permitting them, issuing permits, regulating them, or you're going to lose federal highway money. Now, I think that's important because if our federal government, through this study or something else, thought that digital advertisements were unsafe for motorists, I can assure you they would have pressured Indiana to make them illegal from a statewide perspective. What we have here, though, is that our Indiana General Assembly has said on state and federally funded highways, as long as you meet parameters, and there are all kinds of parameters you have to meet to be able to get an NDOT permit, we're going to allow you to have digital, and here are the rules we expect you to follow. The 8-second flip rule, that's not a Lamar thing, that's not another sign company thing, that's a rule that NDOT has put in place that says, here's how often you can change the ad. And digitals have to be on back-to-back signs. You can't do them on any other kinds of structures. So the reason I bring all that up is I think it's important that both our federal government and our state government has said, we think digitals are safe.
But they've also not said that municipalities don't have a role in regulating them.
Oh, absolutely you do.
You said yourself, as long as you follow certain rules, well, the rules here are our UDO. And our UDO, and whether or not, whether it's with the town council or the plan commission or the BZA, or, we have to look at how does your presentation fit with our UDO and the application of the UDO. No one's saying they're not safe. No one has said that. I don't think anybody here thinks that they're not safe. What we're saying is this appropriate to use in this particular spot? And the fact that you have had a billboard, your billboard's not going to be less effective because it doesn't have digital. That billboard's been there a long time. If it was not effective, people wouldn't be putting signs up on it. It might be more and better, but I can buy an Audi all electric for $80,000, and it doesn't mean that it might be better, but it doesn't mean what I currently have is not good.
It could likely be more effective for some local businesses because with the digital, you don't really have to get locked in like you sometimes do with the vinyl. Buying a spot on a board
There's a fair argument to make from a business standpoint, but from our perspective, it's not our job to look after, let me rephrase. It is our job to enforce the UDO. And people who want to do business in our town, we wrote the UDO. Our UDO was just recently updated after very, very, very hard work by some of the people sitting in this room. And the UDO was written with the intent of supporting our community in all of its facets. Business, schools, drivers, pedestrians, the whole aspect. Our job is to make sure that, as the BZA, is to make sure that the UDO, if there's a request to vary from it, you have a really good reason to ask to not have to be held to the UDO. I just don't know that you've met that. And,
Okay.
and particularly with this study, the study absolutely does not say there's no correlation. It doesn't talk about it.
It says there's not an increased causal connection
Does
between
not use that
digital.
word at all. It says there's no increase in the movement of the eyes from the road, but there might be if there's slower traffic and in certain municipal situations. It's just, to me, it's not helpful. It doesn't support your argument, doesn't negate what you're saying, but this is not the best data for you to present to me to say, and guess what? We've got a study showing that in 50 towns where we had a digital billboard in a municipal area with high traffic, that there was no increase in accidents, pedestrian or vehicle. That's what I would like to see.
What's impactful about this is it came from the Federal Highway Administration itself. If Lamar does a study or the trade association does a study,
I don't disagree with that.
it'll always be attacked as,
Oh,
a piece of
absolutely. I don't
propaganda.
disagree with that.
That's
And
not what this is.
This would be impactful for other reasons, but to me, it's not, it doesn't hold sway for this.
Okay. Any other questions I can answer?
I actually have a couple questions. It might be more for,
For Jason?
yes, for Jason. Mine is, I'm taking a completely different path here real quick. I'm concerned about the letter that is from Mr., how do you say his name? Tonius?
Yes.
Okay. So my question is, he's obviously equipped to be able to make a pretty impactful statement about no problem with homeowners or property devaluation. So I guess what I want to know, a couple things. How did you connect with him? Did you just blindly, and what's your relationship to Mr. Tonius?
Approach Mr. Tonias because he works at FC Tucker, which is on Highway 36, which is right where this billboard is located here in Avon.
So just out of happenstance, you.
I know him as a colleague. They advertise on billboards. So, they're familiar with the product. And I
And
thought,
so
again, that
his-
would be somebody that would know whether or not billboards have any effect on.
You had a prior relationship with him.
No, I know that they use one of our competitors, actually.
And so is his primary office in Avon or elsewhere?
I believe
Indianapolis or-
Indianapolis and Avon.
And Carmel, perhaps?
Could be.
Okay, it is. So the other thing I wanted to know is that I'm just trying to see how well he knows the Avon market to be able to say that about property. That's all. You can read studies and reports.
I
But
understand.
it's if you're beating a path around, this is your neighborhood, this is your backyard, I think sometimes it makes a difference. So that's what I'm getting at.
One
One
of the
last
homes-
question.
I'm
Excuse me.
sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, we did look at this ourselves too, but obviously if I give real estate information, I'm not quite as qualified, but I believe it's 89 Avon Parkway, which is one of the homes that would probably be in the most direct line, is increased in value with our billboard there, over $70,000, from $110,000 sold, I believe, in 2011, to most recently purchased, I think, in 2019, for about 170. So the homes are valuing with an illuminated billboard there.
Well, I realize that there are a lot of factors that go into making a statement like that. Excuse me?
No, there's a lot of factors.
Yeah, it's
driving
not
home
just one. I
values.
realize we're talking about, and I'm not going to take up any more time debating all of that. So my last question is, you said that you were colleagues at one time or not?
Yes.
Does he have any background in digital marketing? Do you know?
Not that I know of.
Thank you.
Other questions? Any other discussion?
I know we've talked about safety and I'm not sure which side of safety we've gone on, but I do think there is a safety concern. I think Catherine, as you pointed out, and we only saw a snippet of that study anyway, but I was reading the same thing that you went over, and it doesn't really give you any information one way or the other, but it does definitely talk about gaze being averted for an electronic sign. And that's the thing about these signs is like as they change, it draws attention to it. And we talked about billboards and safety in driving and making sure that the driver's attention is staying on the road. So I do think it causes a safety issue. And it sounds like that's one of those where it can be on neither side of the argument. You may agree with it, may not. I also don't think it's a practical difficulty of this property. I mean, our ordinance is written the way it's written, that we wouldn't have a billboard constructed today with the 36 overlay the way it's at. And so with it being illegal non-conforming, it has a right to do business there as it is today, but with any changes, then it's expected to come in conformance with the ordinance, thus the need for the variance. But I don't see the practical difficulty of that. I understand, but I don't agree with the argument.
And I'll concur with your observations there on the practical difficulty issue. I think, we discussed this in the last meeting. Conformance with a particular business plan in my book is not a practical difficulty. You have a billboard today, you will have a billboard tomorrow. You'll still put advertisement on it. You'll still make money. And I think staff hit the nail on the head. This isn't about practical difficulty. This is just about a matter of preference. Backing up a little bit, the need for the variance, does the need for a variance arise from some condition peculiar to the property? And we heard tonight here that our ordinance is peculiar. And I was knocked over by that. I can't sit here and tell you who in the state of Indiana has ordinance that prohibits, that has prohibitions of digital billboards. But I can certainly tell you, we are not the only one. And I bet we're not peculiar at the end of the day. The other thing I wanted to bring up with respect to just public health, safety, morals, general welfare of the community. I've been at this since 2007. And I know going back before I was here, the people who developed our ordinances wrote our lighting standards around the Dark Skies Initiative. And I know that was something important for the people here in town. That's always a big issue. I'm sure you guys talk about that all the time in Plan Commission, is about lighting spillover. And in this case, I don't think we have any regulations that particularly regulate that, but I think that has something to do why this prohibition is in place. So I've just named off 3 items on our list of statutory requirements that I don't think that this complies with. Any other discussion? Before we get into motions, Mitchell, would you like these made together or separately? Okay. With that, we will entertain a motion for, this is VAR 23-03.
So if you allow me, could I make a motion on 2304, which I think could have an impact on
If you'd like to do
2303?
2304, that first, that's fine.
I move we deny VRU 2304 Lamar Billboard Digital Conversion, a variance used to allow for the conversion of a legally established non-conforming billboard sign into a digital billboard sign, since it has not satisfied all the requirements for variances of use under state law and subject to the approved findings of fact.
We have a motion by Mr. Guckenberger. Do we have
A
a second?
second.
Second by Mrs. Ransberger. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Guckenberger,
4.
Inman,
4?
Ransberg,
4.
Tashler,
4.
Turner.
4.
The motion is carried. The variance has been denied.
And
Be glad to make a motion for 2303.
Okay.
I move that we deny VAR 2303 Lamar billboard illumination, a variance of development to allow for an internally illuminated digital billboard within 600 feet of a residential district, since it has not satisfied all the requirements for variances to development standards under state law and subject to the approved findings of fact.
We have a motion by Mr. Guckenberger. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Inman. Any discussion? We are ready for roll call vote.
Guckenberger,
4.
Inman,
4?
Ransberg,
4.
Tashler,
4.
Turner.
4.
The vote is 5-0. The motion has been approved and the variance is denied.
Thank you.
Seconded that first motion. I didn't write that down.
Catherine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we are moving on to new business. And would you like both these heard at the same time, Ian, or separately? Would you like both of these heard at the same time or separately? Same time?
We don't have proposed motions for this one.
Oh, you don't? No.
None of this, I don't think any of us got them.
We'll wing it.
We can manage without.
Yeah.
I think we started with that.
We'll make sure language is right.
Do you want to
Well-
press one or not?
Would you guys, okay.
I'm willing to wing it if
We got some wingers here.
yeah.
We got some wingers here.
They're gonna wing it. Okay. Ian? I'm sorry, before we get in here. So right now, we are hearing VAR 23-8A and 2308B, both for the Rafe Skillman facility.
Correct, VAR 2308A, that's for Stillman Hyundai South Lot fence. And we also have VAR 2308B, Stillman Hyundai South Lot sidewalk. 2308A fence is a request for approval of a variance of development standards to allow for a fence to be erected within the front yard of a property located within the US Highway 36 overlay. VAR 2308B, the sidewalk is a request for approval of a variance of development standards to negate the requirement for an internal pedestrian walkway that connects with the public sidewalk. This is located at lot 2 of Jarvis subdivision. It does not have an address at this time. But it's a 3.46 acre parcel and it's zone I2 and it's located within tier 3 of the 36 overlay. Here's the property in question here. As you can see, it's sandwiched between two similar, if not identical, uses on each side. Further to the west, we'll also see a storage facility. I'll bring that up because I'll touch on it briefly. It is owned I2. Its surrounding property is owned C2 and C3. It was originally platted under MIPP 1404 Kingston Jarvis minor plat. It has remained vacant since then. But TPR 2303 Ray Skillman Hyundai South parking lot, which is the development plan review for this site, is scheduled to be heard on the April 24th plan commission meeting. AR 2308A, as I said, is a request to allow for a fence within a front yard. Chapter 2.1003D of the UDO states that fences are prohibited within a front yard in the US Highway 36 overlay. The purpose of this fence would be to protect the vehicle merchandise that the property owners intend to store on the site. The request is highly consistent with the surrounding land uses. I brought up some of the uses when we were looking looking at the larger map. But front yard fences exist on each of the adjacent properties, which are for the same purpose. So to the east, you can see here, there's a storage lot, and additionally on the western, there's a storage lot with a fence in the front of the property. And just past this west adjacent property, you can see this building far in the distance here. That's extra space storage. It also has a front fence in the front yard. The appellant proposes to construct a 6-foot black aluminum decorative fence that will be consistent with the fence to the east. They actually want to tie into that fence, run it to the west end of the property, and then run it back approximately 35 feet from there. And it'll include a 20-foot rolling gate at the entrance. So here's a site plan of the proposed fence highlighted in yellow here. It'll tie in on the east side of the property, head west. At the western limit of the property, it'll come down south approximately 35 feet. Here's the sliding gate here. We do recommend approval of VAR 2308A, Ray Skillman Hyundai South Parking Lot Fence, subject to the following conditions. The fence shall be 6 feet tall and black aluminum decorative fence. The second condition is that any deviation from the provided plan shall be subject to review and approval by the zoning administrator. And then lastly, a fence permit shall be obtained prior to the erection of a fence on this lot. Now, if you'd like, I can continue on to the next one, or if you wanted to stop here, I figured I would leave it up to you. I don't know if it's too much information.
I think it'd be helpful to hear both of them.
Both of them, right on. Next up, we got VAR 2308B. It's a variance of development standard to negate the requirement for an internal pedestrian walkway that connects with the public sidewalk. Chapter 2.10J1 of the UDO states that all parking areas with more than 50 spaces must be, there must be at least one internal pedestrian walkway with a minimum width of 5 feet that connects the internal pedestrian walkway with the public sidewalk or trail. And of course, the intent of this standard is to provide a safe route for patrons or anyone using the lot to navigate to the public sidewalk in a safe manner. We believe that the enforcement of that standard would be antithetical to the intended use of the property in conjunction with the variance that we heard previously. The intent is to create a secure site for the storage of their merchandise, their vehicle merchandise, and to discourage access by public or unauthorized persons. It's important to note, however, that the development will still construct the required 5-foot sidewalk in the public right-of-way along Kingston Street, and they're only seeking to remove the requirement to connect an internal pedestrian network to the public sidewalk. Well, I didn't pick that, but we recommend VAR 2308B for the sidewalk. Don't mind my error there. We recommend approval of that, subject to no conditions.
So the sidewalk is to just allow pedestrian access to that from the pre-existing area business, correct?
Yes, to connect the site to the public pedestrian network.
Okay, so they can take, employees and customers can walk back there?
Yes,
Okay. Otherwise, there'd be no way to get there.
correct.
Okay. Thought that's what it was, just wanted to.
You mentioned that on either side of the property, they had fences. Those were granted by variance also.
I could not find a variance for those on file.
Really?
Correct.
Okay.
That was
There-
quite the
there
explanation
are-
there.
There are a slew of variances associated with the development of the dealerships, but none of them are regarding that lot nor for the fences.
Can we allow a fence to tie into a non-conforming fence?
You don't typically do that in residential districts. You don't typically allow that.
You get into issues of property rights on
Vested
whose
rights.
fence that is when it's adjoining and who has to maintain it. So typically we don't recommend any requirement that they tie into an existing fence.
That's why you see all those residential properties with a strip this wide between fences.
I guess the question is that, is there an action that is going to be taken to notify those property owners if there's no variances on file?
Well, the surrounding property owners have been notified on this variance.
No, they're talking regarding the fact that there's no variance for the adjoining property fences. However, there is an approved development plan with those fences shown.
Right.
Not dwell, I guess has no bearing on this case, but I mean, can we?
Get added to your to-do list.
Well, it kind of gets into that, it conforms to the development, the fence on either side, but the fences weren't approved with a variance. So it's almost like that piece of evidence is, I don't know, is that good evidence or is that bad evidence? That
Depends on which side you're on.
Well, I think that,
Before,
these are questions, yeah.
we probably need to save these for discussion. I've got a lot of weirdo stuff rolling through my head.
I have one question for staff.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I do have a question.
Yeah, they were included. So those fences were included we did look at the development plan reviews and the fences were included. The only variances that we found for stuff on the DPRs was one of the Andy Moore lots, but that dealt with a reduction from a 10-foot to a 20-foot front yard. Our guess is that this fence requirement came into effect with the new UDO. And so in the previous UDO, it wasn't in place, if that makes sense. So it was a conforming at the time. Now, the other option is that it was missed during review. I mean, those are the two options that we found. And just because of course, I didn't do the review, but just because I'm a planner, I would hope that it was because the ordinance changed and this became a non-conforming use.
So I'll hold my question on that. Go back to the 2308B on the internal sidewalk. If we approve this variance, does this variance continue with the property regardless of the property owner? So if Ray Skillman would sell this, it'd be developed for another use that this variance would stay in force?
That would be correct, yes.
Is there a way to limit the life of this variance to this use of the property? So if it would be purchased and have some commercial business that then where it would make sense to have an internal pedestrian sidewalk, that it would require that to be put in place?
I suppose you
Really, I
could.
think the only probably rational nexus that you could make with that is if the landowner removes the fence, and then still meets the requirements for the pedestrian walkways, then at that time, they would need to install any requirements for the pedestrian walkways.
There is a curveball with this particular one. The Plan Commission will get this next Monday because it's on the Plan Commission's docket for a development plan review. And that is, as a storage lot, it's zoned I2. So, and because it's zoned I2, a storage lot, commercial storage lot is permitted, but a standalone parking lot is not permitted.
Oh, okay.
So if they were to go to a standalone parking lot for the general public, then they would have to either rezone the property to C2, and the Plan Commission would have abided, requiring them by commitment to put an interior sidewalk in there, or get a use variance for that, and you come back and you could require that internal sidewalk at that time. But right now, what they're asking for is a storage lot for their overflow merchandise.
On that same issue, and correct me if I'm wrong, I've always been taught that the variance goes with the land, not the owner.
Yes.
Is that, okay. Any other questions for staff? We're right here from petitioner.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Brady Vaughn. I'm with Crossroad Engineers located at 115, thank you, 115 North 17th Avenue in Beech Grove, Indiana, 46107, and presenting for the Rayskillman Avon Hyundai South Parking Lot project, specifically the 2 development standards variances that Ian has just gone over. I'm presenting on behalf of the owner of this project, Rayskillman Avon Realty, and I'm joined by Frank Williams, a representative of the owner. So just to kind of go over and backtrack to where this is located, it's between US 36 and the railroad junction. Specifically, it's east of Avon Marketplace. And if we zoom in here, specifically east of Avon Marketplace and south of Kingston Street. The existing site, as Ian said, makes up Lot 2 of the Jarvis subdivision's 3.46 acres. Currently, the site is vacant aside from the detention pond that's on the south part of the parcel. So the proposed project consists of a new vehicle storage lot covering just over 2 acres of the site. Along with those improvements will be new storm sewer, landscaping, and the 5-foot public sidewalk will also be installed with this project. Along with that, we would also like to install the fence in the front yard. And that is where our request for the variances come in. So Ian already went over exactly what it says in the UDO, so I'll move past this quickly. But for the first one, fences are prohibited within the front yard of a setback on the highway, the US Highway 36 overlay district. And then along with that, parking areas with more than 50 spaces are to have at least one internal pedestrian walkway that connects the internal pedestrian walkway to the public sidewalk. And so as Ian showed earlier, this is what we are proposing to install. And this is the fence to the east that the Andy Moore Kia dealership currently has. It's 6-foot aluminum decorative fence, and this would be what Rayskillman intends to use on this lot. Also, as Ian showed earlier, the goal would be to just create as minimum fence as we can. And so we would tie in at the east end of the property to Andy Moore's fence, run west along the front of the site, turn south for approximately 35 feet, and then install the 20-foot rolling gate at the drive entrance. So that brings me to the criteria for decision-making that the board uses to determine the fate of these variances. So the first one, will the approval be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community? We feel that a fence in the front yard of this development will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. The installation of the fence on this property will essentially aid in the safety and protect the vehicles that are in the lot being stored, whether that's being stored for sale or being stored for maintenance. And we feel the same can be said for the pedestrian walkway. The lot is for private staff and employee use only. And so the parking lot, in addition to that, will be graded in such a way that it is still ADA accessible. And so we're not essentially saying that there will be no ability to walk throughout the parking lot. It's more so that we don't want to have the extra path running through the fence from our lot to the public sidewalk. The second one, will the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance be affected in substantially adverse manner? We feel that the use and value will not be affected in an adverse manner, primarily because both of to the east and west already have fence in the front yard, and it's a very similar use to what we'll be putting in place. Additionally, not providing the pedestrian walkway will also not affect the adjacent lots. As I said, we will still be providing the public right-of-way sidewalk connection so that from the east to the west, you will still be able to traverse past this parcel, just not into the parking lot. The third one, will the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance constitute a practical difficulty if applied to the property which the variance is sought? We feel that it will cause practical difficulty to the owner of the dealership. since this is intended to be a lot for storing vehicles that will later be sold or serviced and not for something that the public should have access to. Without the fence, the owner would likely try to find another way to secure the lot so that they feel comfortable storing their vehicles back there. Without the fencing, they feel that it could be exposed to theft, vandalism, you name it. And as far as the pedestrian path goes, requiring that path would require a second gated entrance, and that the owner would want to gate or lock that entrance as well, given that there's a rolling gate at the drive approach. So having the second access kind of destroys the point of the fence in the first place.
Mhm.
That's our feeling of how these kind of coincide. One goes with the other. 4, is the variance requested the minimum necessary? We feel that this is the minimum necessary request because it is only in the front yard that fences is not allowed. It's allowed in the rear and side yards. So we are only asking for the variance in the front yard to secure the lot. As far as the parking, the pedestrian walkway goes, this is the minimum necessary, we feel, because we are still creating a parking lot that's ADA accessible, and like the employees will have every capability of walking in and out of the lot or driving in and out of the lot, which I think is more what we will see use-wise. But providing the connection, we're still providing the connection for the public right-of-way, that walk that runs from east to west. We're just not connecting that public walk into our private lot. And then the need for the variance was not caused by the owner, previous or present. This variance is really caused by the need to protect the vehicles that are stored in this lot. And the request to remove the pedestrian sidewalk is along the same vein of we want to protect the vehicles that are stored in this lot, and creating a public entrance kind of destroys the point of securing the lot. So with that, I will open it up for any questions or comments from the board.
Before we get into questions, let's open up the public hearing. And to be clear, This is-
Just the petitioner was, sorry.
this is the public hearing for VAR 23-08A and VAR 23-08B. So the public hearing is open.
And just the petitioner signed up for the,
Okay. And no one else in the audience wishes to speak. We will close the public hearing. Thank you. We're open for question and discussions.
Well, I agree with the petitioner about the practical difficulty is really a security issue. And you're protecting a huge investment. And whoever in the originally planning commission or otherwise decided on that fence that the other lots have, it's a nice, high quality, good looking fence.
And I agree too, that it's also, it's a safety issue, regardless of the value of the inventory, that's, if they want to sell Rolls Royces or they want to sell Yugos, that's up to them. But, doing the, I don't know.
Forgot about those.
Yeah. But the worst car ever built. But, just in terms of creating a safer environment, if that's open to vandalism or even theft, that's a crime issue. And I think having the fence there just helps to remove temptation, as they might say.
And I would say, I raised the question about the internal sidewalk, but for the use of this property, it does make sense to give the variance to not have an internal sidewalk, as really not promoting pedestrian traffic in that storage lot. So I agree with staff's assertions.
Okay. I'm generally in agreement with the staff report and what the petitioner has presented. I'm having a really hard time on the practical difficulty on this one. And I'm no pun intended, but I'm kind of sitting a fence on it. On the one hand, I don't know, I guess I was around when we came up with the vision for Kingston and what it was supposed to be. It was never intended to be something that was gated off and used for storage. The vision was, we're going to have all sorts of economic development, and we're going to have warehouses doing business, and that's, and to have a parking lot there is, I don't want to say anything bad or reflect poorly on you, but that wasn't the vision, and to have fences there wasn't the vision. That's fine and good. And so, we put a lot of work into coming up with these standards, and now we're going, okay, well,
So are you talking
we've got
about the
this.
practical difficulty?
I'm talking about practical difficulty.
The fence or the sidewalk? Or
No,
both?
the sidewalk I'm fine with. It's
Okay.
the fence.
The fence, okay.
And my point here, what I'm taking the long way around, is to say, normally I would look at having a fence not really being a practical difficulty. You have a parking lot today. If there's no fence there, then you still have a parking lot, and the lots in front of it don't need the parking lot for security. The other side of this, I guess the other side of the fence I'm looking at is I think we've fallen into a bit of a trap that I always worry about with signs, where someone comes in and says, oh, I don't have enough signage, so you give them a variance. And then the next guy comes in and says, well, now I'm at a competitive disadvantage because you gave that guy a bigger sign. I think we're kind of in the same boat here. Everybody's put fences up, and
Except
now.
that they're at the end of that. They're not
Yeah.
they're not the instigator of fence building.
Yes. So then you've created a de facto practical difficulty. So I guess I could be persuaded to go along with it.
It'd be
but
more
it's just
aesthetically pleasing for it all to be connected.
yeah. Don't necessarily like it, but I can go along with it.
So what side of the fence you on?
Any other discussion? Anyone care to make a motion? We're making both these motions separately.
I move that we approve VAR 2308A, a variance of development standards to allow for a fence to be erected within the front yard of a property located within the U.S. Highway 36 overlay zoning district, since it has satisfied all the requirements for variances under state law and subject to the approved findings of fact.
Just one point, there are conditions that are in the staff report. So I'd ask that those be put into the
Dot,
motion or
dot,
discussed.
dot.
The fence will be 6 feet. Page 4, is that?
The fence, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report.
Second.
Well, motion by Mrs. Ransberg, a second by Mr. Guckenberger. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Guckenberger.
Or
Inman.
4.
Ransberg.
4.
Tashler.
4.
Turner.
4.
The vote is 5-0 for an approval motion. The variance is approved.
Okay. And now we'll entertain a motion on the second variance. This will be for the sidewalk.
I move that we approve variance 23-08B, a variance of development standards to allow for a development of a car dealership satellite vehicle storage lot without the required internal pedestrian walkway connection to public sidewalk. Since it has not,
yes.
it just has satisfied all the requirements for variances under state law and subject to the approved findings of fact. And there were no conditions listed.
We have a motion by Mrs. Inman. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Tashler. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Guckenberger.
For
Inman.
4?
Ransberg.
4.
Tashler.
4.
Turner.
4.
Vote is 5-0 on an approval recommendation. The variance is approved.
Other business? Ian?
let's be sure we sign things before we leave. I've been trying to remind us all before end of our meetings.
Thank
I
you.
have,
I have
as far as signing things go, I have 5 things up here for everyone to sign. Just send those down to Marcy and we'll send them.
I have 2 things I'd like to bring up.
Go ahead.
This is for staff, so Bill and Ian. So on multiple primary uses, so I just want to make sure, because what you read to us in the UDO, to make sure it's on record, that we now allow multiple primary uses because our previous ordinance did not.
Right.
So
Because
if we-
I've seen some variances for multiple primary uses in a commercial district under the old zoning ordinance. That's right. The current zoning ordinance changed that so that you could have multiple primary uses on a non-residential lot.
How will that affect commitments that were made under the previous ordinance to remove a primary use that was granted a time-limited variance?
It shouldn't affect it anyway. It's a commitment on the approval of it. So yeah, it shouldn't.
They still have to honor that commitment? Okay. And then the one thing that I really don't like is when petitioners hand out materials that you haven't seen and we haven't seen at the meeting, because now we have to go through and if we wouldn't have gone where we went with the petition, I would have asked for continuation because we got a few pages of an 80-page study and they're asking us to make a decision based on a little bit of evidence that they cited. And I would want you to have time to review all the materials that they bring forth, and I would want us to have time to review that. So I'd ask is that you just let the petitioners know that they make sure they have everything in the packet that we're going to receive and not bring it to the meeting, because I'll move for continuance. Whether my fellow board members agree with me, I just don't like to have to review materials during the meeting.
So when signing these, they've been signed twice on the nay side, even though they voted for it. Do we need to print new ones or can we just cross out and
Right,
sign
that
them?
I print new ones.
Okay.
Sorry,
Didn't I just hang tight?
we were voting
Did I do that?
for a refusal
I
to
know,
grant.
that's confusing.
Four to nine.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah,
we're-
I was not
we're
happy.
voting Yes, we're voting, we're signing yes for a no.
Correct.
All right.
So while we're,
This needs to be shredded.
is there any other business? Okay, then we are adjourned.